And we are live. Welcome to Tonight in America. I'm your host, Don Terrence Jones. I want to welcome you back to the show. We have an exciting show for you today. Today's first time in a while. We have a morning show. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn my mic on. Hope the mic sounds good, everyone. I was getting ready for the show and taking a shower, getting it ready, taking my precious little time. Sorry I'm late. And yeah, I'd also forgot to I haven't slept yet, so I'm very kind of exhausted right now. So bear with me. But tonight we're recapping everything that's happened so far with all the protesting that went on in Iran. Now it has ended, apparently, according to reports right now. And President Trump has said that there was supposed to be a planned execution as of yesterday. It will not happen now, according to President Trump, because Iran has said they would not go ahead with the public execution. Give me one moment, actually. Let me turn on my light right quick. Rushing to do the show. I forgot to switch on my light. But yeah, so Iran has announced that they're not going to go through with the public execution, according to Trump himself. He said this just this morning, actually, on Fox News. We're going to review that after we go through everything. So, um, so pretty much, yeah. If you already have missed it, which I'm surprised you're not right now, the entire media, the entire mainstream media has now decided to go ahead and start giving massive coverage to the Iranian protests that's been going on in Iran for like the last month or so. It started last month in December, and it's continued on into this month right now. And now the Iranian regime has managed to get everything under control right now as we speak. There's still like minor protests going on in certain cities of Iran, but right now, for the most part, they've quelled down the massive violent protest. So we're going to talk about it more in detail. Then we're also going to talk about why people are basically falling for like a form of propaganda, and why you shouldn't buy into what you're being fed by mainstream media about why you should care about what's going on in Iran, and why you should push hard for President Trump to go and interfere basically with what I call propaganda being pushed by like a bunch of bad fake actors, as I said before, but really by foreign operatives, and some also domestic operatives of our own, of course. So as per usual, being America first means we don't get involved in foreign affairs, and this is no different at all. As you can see, we've had for like the last couple of days, I think we've had like a dozen or so Iranian. I'm hyperballing that, but we've had like a bunch of like refugees from Iran going on media tours, telling us about why Trump should send the military to go and execute a regime change in Iran, and saying that this would benefit the Iranian people more than ever, to liberate them and to bring about a real leader that will bring democracy back to Iran, even though, ironically enough, they fought to eliminate democracy from Iran and decided to go in a monarch system. So it's very interesting that they fought so hard to liberate themselves from a monarch, from a authoritarian system, to go to a more of a monarch, Islam run system. And now, according to a bunch of these refugees, they want to liberate themselves of this regime and bring about, as most are pushing, as the son of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi. Some are pushing for him. According to the ringleader, in my opinion, Patrick Bet David, he says the Shah is not really fit to be in a position to run the country of Iran yet, because they feel like the majority of the Iranians are not in favor of the former Shah's son. And as many of these Iranians are saying, there are people in the streets protesting and calling for his name or whatever. But let me just give you guys a perspective where you need to understand. Just because you see photos of people in the crowd saying that they want Reza Pahlavi to come there and be the dictator doesn't automatically. We got to use some critical thinking skills. Just because you see the protesters are sitting there, allegedly protesters are going out there and calling for his name or whatever, that doesn't mean that at all that this is not being pushed in a certain way to give off more of like I said before, of like a sympathy propaganda. Like it's drawn on the sympathy of the American people to care about what's going on in Iran, even though, yes, whatever's going on is very sad. But like I mentioned it on my show on Monday about this, that it's on purpose. All of this is done on purpose. And it's very clear how it's done on purpose. So before I go over that, I'm going to give you guys like a little bit overview of everything that's happened so far. So this is from War Fronts, the blueprint, all the ways the U.S. could intervene in Iran. So this is a good video right here to give you basically like an overview, and then I'm going to go through the articles and then some other videos that I have, and then I'm going to give you my take about it and about why is that this is pretty much just done on purpose. Because let's be real for a moment. Iran is no different than Saudi Arabia. It's way no different. Both are ruled by a monarch. Hell, the only difference between Saudi Arabia and Iran right now is because one's being sanctioned to hell, the other one is an American ally, a trusted ally. So if people really want to sit up here and give sympathy or whatever and say Iran, the regime is whatever, is oppressing its people, bruh, we literally work with Saudi Arabia. Let's try to use some common sense right here. But anyways, we're going to jump into the video and then I'm going to savor my take afterwards.
On Sunday, the 28th of December, a group of Iranian business owners in Tehran made a decision that could yet reshape the Middle East. They closed their shops, went on strike, and started a protest that at the time of writing has lasted more than 2 weeks and spread throughout the entire country. When we covered it last week, we said that it was perhaps the greatest challenge that the Iranian regime has faced, even greater than the Masha Amini riots, or even the 12-day war with Israel. And our assessment of that was based on 2 factors. First, the protests seemed to grow with each passing day, and as they expanded, the government seemed to lose control of more cities. Second, reports emerged that Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader and someone who has long portrayed himself as the embodiment of revolutionary strength, was making plans to escape Iran. And we weren't the only ones who came to that conclusion. During a recent trip to India, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz told reporters that the world was witnessing the final days and weeks of the Iranian regime, an extraordinary statement from the usually reserved leader. While the protests have been a major factor behind the predicted collapse, a street uprising alone is unlikely to unseat such a bloodthirsty regime. No, the main factor that will determine Tehran's fate is the ongoing possibility of a US intervention. A possibility.
Like I said before we continue on with the video, this whole like push for like the regime, look, I'm not pro the regime at all. I'm not pro not pro interventionist in the Middle East at all, quite frankly, if it doesn't really benefit the American empire. Okay, I was pro invading Venezuela. The reason why I was pro invading Venezuela because it was because of the Monroe Doctrine. And why not? Because it's our hemisphere, it's our sphere of influence. So I'm not for, I'll pull my face up right quick, I'm not for us getting involved in foreign affairs that are in other countries that are around the world that basically have nothing to do with us. And it's not, like I said before, it's on purpose. So yes, the regime, what it's doing is horrible to its people, but we also got to use some common sense. We did sanction them to hell. That's why they're going through what they're going through right now. So let's jump back into the video.
It became increasingly likely after President Donald Trump declared, and we'll quote him here, "To all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the names of the killers and the abusers, because they'll pay a very big price. Help is on its way." But this still raises a big question. What would American help actually look like? Because the administration has a lot of options on the table right now, some of them low risk and others combining high risk with the greatest prize of all, the final fall of the Iranian regime. Diplomacy fails. When reporters asked White House spokesperson Carolyn Levitt what America's plans were in Iran, she insisted that while the president was unafraid to use military options, diplomacy was always the preferred method to settle such issues. And for a while, it seemed that Washington and Tehran would sit at the negotiating table and hammer out a deal. President Trump told reporters on Air Force One on Monday that Iran had reached out to negotiate over its nuclear program. According to the Wall Street Journal, senior administration figures led by Vice President J.D. Vance were privately pursuing Trump to pursue diplomacy before going for any military option. In Tehran, the Iranian government insisted that it was ready for negotiations, but only if they were fair and based on mutual respect. Tehran also said the communications channels were open between Steve Witkoff, America's special envoy to the Middle East, and Abbas Arghashi, Iran's foreign minister. Given that we are talking about possible interventions, you can probably guess how well diplomacy worked. In the same speech where he urged the Iranian people to keep protesting, Trump announced that he was cancelling all negotiations with Iranian officials until the killing of protesters stopped. Since the demonstrations began, the killing of protesters has been a major red line for President Trump. During an interview with radio host Hugh Hewitt, he said that if the Iranian regime killed protesters, America would hit them hard. So how bad is the death toll for President Trump to stop all negotiations with Iran barely 3 days after they started? Well, the answer is really f***ing bad. Despite the government-imposed internet blackout, a recurring image has made its way out of Iran: rows and rows of body bags. According to the most conservative estimates published by the Associated Press, at least 2,571 people had been killed since the protests started. CBS, on the other hand, reported that at least 12,000 people and possibly as many as 20,000 had been killed. To put that in perspective, it took 10 weeks of sustained Israeli bombardment before the Hamas-run health ministry declared 20,000 had been killed in Gaza. If the higher total is correct, and we should caution that an accurate count is currently impossible, the Iranian regime would have managed to hit the same milestone in mere days. And it's not just the killings, it's how they happened. Eyewitnesses told the New York Times that government forces used automatic weapons indiscriminately opening fire on unarmed protesters. Again, these are trained security forces using automatic weapons to shoot unarmed people. Apart from killing protesters in the streets, Tehran has also threatened to execute those behind the protests, including 26-year-old Arfan Soltani. One protester told the Times, and we'll quote her here, "The regime is on a killing spree." Given this is being recorded on Wednesday morning, it's still unclear if the regime is carrying out its threats to execute thousands. But even if we were to ignore such reprisals and take only the most conservative death toll figures, that would still make the events in Iran among the deadliest protests in recent history, up there with the post-election October crackdown in Tanzania. If we take the higher one, then it becomes a state-sponsored massacre. Since diplomacy has quite clearly failed, what's next? And it's here that we get to the White House's first real option: economic pressure. On Monday, President Trump announced that any country doing business with Iran would face a 25% tariff on any business they did with America. Although it wasn't immediately clear what the president meant by doing business with Iran, or even how the tariff would be implemented, observers saw it as a clear message to China, Iran's biggest trade partner, not to go against American interests in Tehran. Publicly, China has taken a hard line against the sanctions, with the spokesperson saying that Beijing would take all necessary measures to safeguard its interests. Beijing has also expressed support for the Iranian regime, saying that it hoped the country could overcome the current difficulties and maintain national stability. Beyond this, Beijing has been unwilling to further support the Iranian government. Although the two countries recently participated participated in naval drills hosted by South Africa and organized by BRICS, China has refused to give Iran any security assistance. The Wall Street Journal reported that Iranian officials had reached out to Beijing, only to be met with scathing criticism on Chinese social media, which is oftentimes a reflection of the Chinese government's true position. The journal further reported that the main reason why China is hesitant to support Iran is because it doesn't want to expose its banks and companies to sanctions from the US and Europe. The tariff threat has essentially bought the Trump administration time to decide what to do next without having to immediately resort to military force. More importantly, it has exposed just how far China is willing to go for its supposed allies. When push came to shove, Beijing chose access to American markets over supporting Tehran, a calculation that has left Iran more isolated than ever and given Washington more wiggle room to maneuver. The time is running out, and with the death toll climbing and Tehran showing no signs of backing down, the Trump administration is now seriously considering military action. So, let's dig into what that might really entail. But just before we do get into that, just a quick pause to tell you about our news service. Fronts.co is our subscriber-only site for people who look at what we're up to here on War Fronts and think to themselves, I want even more of that, Simon. Yes, please. For just $5 a month, you get access to 2 exclusive videos. Delta Force, the Special Forces. Good. Go check it out. Military intervention. According to multiple outlets, America's military planners have presented a host of strike options to the president should he choose to bomb Iran. Since we are not in Washington, and since we've still not been added to the administration's signal chat, we are obviously not privy to the targets chosen, the scale of the proposed operations, or anything else discussed during these conversations. However, given past US actions and the work of multiple Middle East analysts, we can make some pretty educated guesses on where the US might choose to strike. First, the US might try to target Ayatollah Khamenei directly. According to Dan Sabar, the Guardian's defense and security editor, trying to kill the Ayatollah would be a lot easier than trying to capture him in a Maduro-style raid because Tehran lies thousands of kilometers from the country's borders. Additionally, Khamenei has proven adept at evading enemy detection, as proven during the recent 12-day war. According to Israel Katz, Israel's defense minister, if Khamenei had been in their sights, they would have killed him. Apart from the difficulty in killing Khamenei, there is no guarantee that his death would usher in a new age for Iran. The Times reported in June last year that he had picked an array of replacements down his chain of military command in case more of his valued lieutenants were killed, and he had chosen 3 clerics to replace him in the event of his own death. There's also the possibility that Khamenei could be hiding in Tehran, which means that targeting him would endanger the very protesters that Washington says it wants to protect. So, since Khamenei doesn't seem like a probable option at the moment, what other targets exist? In our view, the most likely targets are Iran's internal security apparatus, specifically those responsible for killing protesters. It's a view shared by Mick Mulroy, a former government official who served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East at the Pentagon. He told ABC that the US would likely focus on regime targets specific to controlling or repressing the protests. In such a case, the most likely targets could be the Ba'ath militia, an all-volunteer paramilitary militia that was praised by Mohammed Ghalib for their actions during the protests. The barracks, command centers, and training facilities could present relatively straightforward targets that would directly impact the regime's ability to suppress demonstrations without requiring America to deploy ground troops. While undoubtedly a significant boon to the protesters, several experts told Radio Free Europe that such a strike would have multiple downsides, primarily enabling Tehran to rally patriotic support and deflect the tension from the grievances fueling the nationwide demonstrations. It would also make it very difficult to shift the support of the security infrastructure away from Tehran towards the protesters. The US, with Israel's support, could also choose to go after Iran's nuclear infrastructure again. Although the two nations struck 3 major nuclear sites last year, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi claims that Tehran had reconstructed everything that was damaged. This is to be a particular concern for Israel, given their past statements that Iran's nuclear program was an existential threat. According to a report by NBC News, Israel was growing increasingly concerned that Iran was rebuilding and even expanding its ballistic missile production, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was set to present President Trump with plans to strike it again. Attacking the nuclear facilities would like the most logical option given the fact that Israel has already presented strike plans. But it faces the same fundamental problem as a prospective strike on military basis. It leaves the regime in Tehran standing, able to potentially use the attacks as a rallying cry to consolidate support. Another possible target is Iran's oil infrastructure, particularly its export terminals and refineries that generate the revenue Tehran uses to fund its crackdown. Iran currently exports nearly 2 million barrels of oil per day, mostly to China, despite U.S. sanctions. According to most observers, crippling Iran's ability to export oil would hit the regime where it hurts most by cutting off the funding that sustains both its security apparatus and its regional proxies. The targets, according to Michael Rubin, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, would likely include the Karg Island terminal in the Persian Gulf, which handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports, along with major refineries in Abadan and Isfahan. These facilities are relatively exposed compared to hardened military sites, making them easier to strike. However, this option carries massive risks. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz if its oil facilities are attacked, a move that would disrupt roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply and send prices through the roof. Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar respectively stressed this point to the administration, warning that the knock-on effects on the American economy would be significant. Despite these concerns, scientists believe that targeting oil infrastructure might be the most effective way to pressure the regime without directly killing Iranian security forces or risking a broader war. Beyond the question of what would the US bomb, there's also the question of how Iran would respond to a potential attack. In the wake of the increasingly hostile rhetoric from Washington, the Iranian Defense Council put out a statement saying, and we'll quote them here, "Any infringement on national interests, interference in internal affairs, or action against Iran's stability will be met with a proportionate, targeted, and decisive response." This is what most people expected, as it falls in line with Iran's military doctrine. In fact, Iran's ambassador to Kenya, Dr. Ali Gholampour, told our Africa correspondent Wilfred nearly the same thing word for word during an interview on Monday. What most people didn't expect was for Iran to say that it would be willing to strike first if it perceived a tangible threat. The question now is whether this is just posturing or if Iran is both willing and capable of following through on that threat. As Sabah noted in The Guardian, although Iran's military capabilities were badly degraded during the 12-day war, Tehran has retained a limited missile capability. Key launch sites remain buried deep in the mountains, and it has been rebuilding its stockpiles. Experts estimate that Iran has 2,000 heavy ballistic missiles, which, if launched in sufficient enough numbers, could evade American and Israeli defenses. These would pose a significant threat to US bases in the region, whether in the case of a preemptive strike or a responsive one. Given all these headwinds, it's understandable why, as several sources told the Washington Post, President Trump has sounded uncertain in private about military action. If he decides against military intervention, he could choose to instead leverage cyber operations or psychological campaigns that the Pentagon has prepared. Cyber operations were used extensively during the operation against Maduro, with President Trump claiming that the US had turned off the power in Caracas to help facilitate the capture. However, according to Kieran Martin, former head of the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, this is unlikely to work in Iran. Speaking to The Guardian, she said that the more possible, albeit theoretical option, would be for the US to try to restore the internet, which has largely been shut down, though she conceded that it would be hard to intervene via cyber to do so. Civilians. Away from the question of how the US will choose to intervene, we have to talk about the Iranian civilians for whom the promised intervention might arrive too late if it arrives at all. We've already mentioned the death toll. What we haven't talked about are the methods Tehran used to achieve it. According to CNN, Tehran deployed new techniques combining cutting-edge military technology with sophisticated psychological operations to crush the protests. Low-flying surveillance drones, signal jammers, a rapid response propaganda apparatus, and of course, the violent deployment of force were unleashed simultaneously. This level of coordination suggested two things. One, that the regime was scared for its survival, and two, that it had learned from past protests. And that raises a bit of an uncomfortable question. If the regime is willing to be this brutal against its own civilians without any American intervention, what happens in case America does intervene? And perhaps even more frighteningly, what happens if America doesn't intervene? The most immediate risk to Iranian civilians in the event of American military action is that it could trigger exactly the opposite response that Washington intends. According to Bilal Saab, associate fellow at Chatham House's Middle East and North Africa program, a strike could harden the resolve of the regime and its still large support base across the country, with a rallying around the flag effect being a real possibility. This would be particularly likely if the strike is symbolic or one-off. In such a case, the Iranian civilians who supported the protest would bear the brunt of an increasingly repressive state, desperate to lash out at any internal foes. There's also the risk that if a strike is successful and manages to dislodge the IRGC, it could lead to a long, drawn-out insurgency that puts civilians at even greater risk. The alternative alternative scenario is equally grim, though. If Trump decides against military action despite his repeated threats, Iranian civilians face the very real possibility that the regime will crush the protests with even greater violence to make it clear that this will never be allowed to happen again. In that case, we would likely be witnessing a repeat of Iraq in 1991, a moment when a US president, in this case George Bush the Elder, encouraged the citizens of a repressive state to rise up against their government, seemingly promising them support. A promise that soon evaporated, giving Saddam the all-clear to slaughter perhaps 100,000 of his own people. Regardless of what happens in the coming hours and days, the Iranian people are once again caught in the crossfire between a great power and a government that has proven time and again that it cares more about staying in power than...
Yo, have I been talking the whole time without my mic being on? Bro. Bro, I've been talking this whole time without my mic being on. Anyways, to go off of a long tangent or whatever, what I said was, all right, pull my mic up right quick. I apologize about that, bruh. Anyways, to backtrack what I said before, let me go back to the beginning right now, explain to you guys exactly what I said. Okay, so Benjamin Netanyahu comes to Washington around Christmas time. His next move is to try to convince President Trump to go to war with Iran. How does he go about convincing him? Speaks about Iran's ballistic missile program, which is still very much pretty much still intact and still very much more operational. So he goes to try to convince Trump to go and bomb Iran's ballistic missile program. Okay. It's not enough to convince Trump to go there and sit up here and says we need to go bomb them just for their ballistic missiles program, because that thing is buried far on the ground. You're not going to hit that thing because it's buried far on the ground. It literally would take at least maybe 4 bunker buster bombs just to do a damp into it, because they built it farther on the ground than even probably the nuclear enrichment facilities. And even those were, we have conflicting reports about those. We don't even know if those were 100% even destroyed. It said they were only set back like by a couple of months at best. So that's why Benjamin Netanyahu came to the White House, is because he came to the White House for the intense purpose was to convince Trump, hey, Iran still has its ballistic missile program. We need to go out here. We need to destroy the ballistic missiles program. How do we go about destroying the ballistic missiles program? The bunker buster bombs, of course. But Trump is not convinced. He realized the base, the public, is not going to be receptive of a regime change war in Iran. It's not enough. What else does he need to do to convince him? Well, let's think about it right now. So around this time, as everyone knows, you have unrest that's going on in Iran. People are mad. People are hungry. People need medicine. People are dying. So the unrest is continuing. The anger is flaring. Pretty much everything is getting bad for the Iranian people. So you know what happens? Tempers flare. And then what do? They go to the streets and they protest the regime, and they want the regime to go out of power because they feel like the regime is not doing its job to take care of its own people domestically. So because of that, now the Iranian people have been protesting for like the last couple of weeks or so, since December into January. It's been peaceful for the most part for what we've seen, but then it started getting bad because the Iranian regime decided to crack down the protest, and then all of a sudden it just went from peaceful to just pure anarchy. Now they're just destroying shit in the streets. Now they're just burning everything down. They're going ransack shops. They're going literally beating people up in the streets, getting guns, shooting military personnel as well. Simultaneously, while the Iranian RGC is trying to get everything under control on their end, simultaneously killing protesters. Simple unrest is pretty much going on. And while all this is going on, you have Starlink, of course, that's in the country active, where Iranians have access to an internet service to go out there and to also broadcast or record videos and post it to X or any social media platform for that. So now you got all those videos all on the internet. Now you have all those, basically, you have all the footage to show the entire world exactly what's really going on in Iran on the streets right now, to give them that perception that, hey, it's really bad on the ground right now here in Iran. We're hungry, we are starving, we are suffering. The regime is not taking care of us or whatever whatsoever. And I'll get over to that in a minute. We're going to go over to some more articles right quick, but I want to give you a little bit of overview of what I was saying while my mic was muted. So you've seen all this going on, and then who else is seeing this? The general public. The general public are seeing it because you got streamers like, Asmongold, Hassan Piker, just to name a few. You have all these streamers that have, that cover politics very rarely. Sometimes very frequently now. A lot of politics has become new pop culture now. So you have a bunch of streamers now that pretty much change their content to becoming political commentators. And now they're reacting to the Iranian protest, and theirs are sympathetic towards the cause of the Iranian people, and now they are pushing the same rhetoric as pretty much what you all are familiar with. It's called neocon rhetoric. They're pushing for a regime change in Iran, and they're urging Trump to go there and bomb them to save the Iranian people from the oppressive regime. So they're sitting up here saying that we need to go and get involved basically in foreign affairs that don't have nothing to do with America, because of what they're seeing on footages that are coming out from Iran, saying that the Iranian government is killing its own people, and we need to go there and save these people from this oppressive regime and take it out of power. Basically what you're seeing is, and what they're also experiencing, is a form of propaganda. What is it called? It's called sympathetic propaganda. What's going on in Iran it happens a lot of times in all of these Middle Eastern countries whenever there's a monarch type dictator in charge of the country. When there's a monarch system in place, or authoritarian, from back then when Iran was run by the Shah, type of stuff like this happened all the time. Saudi Arabia's very much been like this too. They killed a journalist for freak's sakes. So what we're seeing right now is no different than what we could see in Saudi Arabia, what we could see in Libya, what we could see in Syria. There's been a lot of killings in there, but we ain't doing nothing about that. There's Lebanon, What we see is pretty much like the everyday, pretty much thing that's going on in the Middle East right now. But this is good at the same time. It's not good for, of course, not good for us, but who is it good for? It's good for Bibi Netanyahu. It's good for Israel. They're pushing for more war, but how can you get the war to come about? A protest that's going on right now. The people of Iran feels like they're not being treated fairly. They're not being taken care of. They're dying. They're hungry. They're starving. They need medicine. They need every basic need in life right now. And they feel like they're not being taken care of by the regime. That's why the unrest happened. And that's why the protests are also simultaneously happening. So, and that's a great thing, because right now it's bad timing to be involved in the violent protests while you're simultaneously having Israel creeped around there, biting on the chops to go back and restart the war with Iran at any moment. And who's looking for the United States to enter the fray? Israel, of course. That's what Bibi came down here for. around Christmas time. He wants us to start and wants us to get involved, so that way we put ourselves in there, we put our soldiers in there, and we join Israel in the fight to commit to a regime change war, to change the regime and put in pretty much a puppet that's going to comply with not only the United States, but it's going to comply with Israel. That is the purpose of why you're seeing this pushed on the algorithm and also through mainstream media. That's why mainstream media is pushing so hard right now. Even left-leaning media is pushing hard for the United States to go and get involved in Iran and commit to a regime change. You got CNN doing it, ABC, CBS. These guys don't even lean at all on this side of the political spectrum. They're left. But they're pushing hard for a regime change. Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all pushing for regime change war. All of a sudden, you got right, you got left, you got centrist papers, all calling for a regime change to go take place in Iran. Why is that? Because the optics of the protest looks like, to the average people, these people are suffering and they need to be saved and liberated so we can bring about democracy to the Middle East. That is, by definition, neoconservatism. What happened in Venezuela is far different because we didn't take out the regime. They're still a socialist country. It's just now they're going to play ball with the United States. What this is fully committing, changing the regime and putting in a puppet government to bring about democracy to the Middle East, to Iran. Don't let this propaganda fool you right now. You're being drawn in, you're being suckered in, and pretty much you're falling for it. You're falling for the literal propaganda that's easy to spot. Why is it that all media, right or left, are pushing this right now in the public? So as we got right here, this is from the Washington Post. With tensions high, Israel and Iran secretly reassured each other via Russia. This was yesterday when I wanted to cover this. So the two Middle Eastern countries exchanged messages through a Russian intermediary saying they would not preemptively attack each other. Hard to believe that. Days before protest erupted in Iran in late December, Israeli officials notified the Iranian leadership via Russia that they would not launch strikes against Iran if Israel were not attacked first. Well, Israel was not attacked first the last time, so Iran responded through the Russian channel that it would also refrain for a preemptive attack. Diplomats and regional officials with knowledge of the exchange said. Okay, key point to remember. Iran didn't attack them first. They were attacked hard by Israel. As you may have missed, or if you weren't following the war closely, how the conflict started was the United States and Iran were in negotiations about Iran's enrichment of uranium. They were enriching it at a level to where it appeared to be that they were making it a nuclear bomb of. That's what they were accused of, but there was no official report on it that they were making a nuclear bomb. So the United States accused Iran of making a bomb, and they were telling them that they cannot enrich the uranium. First, they told them they couldn't enrich them at that percentage of, like, I think it was 60%. They told them they had to enrich it at 3.5%. Excuse me, I'm kind of a little tired right now, but they told them to enrich it at like 3.5%. And then Steve Witkoff, who was the lead negotiator in this, changed it to they can't enrich at all. So because of that, So because of that, Iran was not willing to play ball with the negotiations because they want, for the purpose for them is they wanted to enrich uranium for the sole purpose was for environmentally to help Iran. It's not to basically sit up here and hold on one second, I'll pull it up for you guys right quick. It was not for the purpose as what they were being accused of. They wanted to enrich based off of the fact that they wanted to use it to environmentally help Iran, because you can use nuclear energy for pretty much just like to strengthen a society. That's what you get when you take enrichment uranium and you put it towards nuclear energy, and you can use it to run an entire society. That's what Iran were saying. That's what they wanted to use their uranium for. Basically, it was to strengthen their civilization with solar energy. So, of course, the United States did not believe it, and were accusing them of making a nuclear bomb. But while the negotiations were going on between the United States and Iran during this point, Israel, who also on the back channels had notified the White House that they were going to attack Iran. And this all happened in June. This is when the 12-day war begun. So, because the White House had prior knowledge about this, they allowed the attack to happen while they were in negotiations with Iran. That's why Iran doesn't trust us right now. They don't trust the word we have to say because, like, we were in the middle of negotiations, a bit of diplomacy with Iran, and we allowed them to be attacked while they let their guard down and while they allowed to negotiate with the United States. We allowed them to get attacked. They got attacked, and they got attacked hard. They didn't get attacked just from the outside. They got attacked from the inside because it was revealed during this 12-day war they had Mossad agents on the inside of Iranian borders. How is that possible, you may ask? Well, I explained this in the last episode that I did, but I'll go through it real quick. So Mossad has pretty much like, it has agents that look like pretty much like a Syrian. They have Syrian Jews. They have Lebanese. They have Libyan. They pretty much have like all kind of Jews from all of the other Middle Eastern countries that look, can talk, can sound like, can blend in. So of course they have Iranian Jews too as well in Israel. So because of that, that is why the Mossad was able to infiltrate the country so easily and execute, in my opinion, a successful sneak attack against Iran. They were able to destroy some of their defensive missiles, and destroy them completely, and put Iran in a bad predicament. That's why the sneak attack was so bad. It could have destroyed Iran, but the missile barrage that came about the first strike, it wasn't enough to really completely wipe them out because Iran was able to recover to some degree, and then they were able to fire back. And then, you know, as you know, it kept going back and forth. The missile barrages kept going back and forth for 12 days. And then they managed to reach a temporary ceasefire agreement to where the fighting could stop right now. So that is why Iran, that is exactly why Iran doesn't really trust the United States government right now. But to sit here and say that Israel won't attack Iran first Israel won't attack Iran if they're not attacked first is disingenuous at best, because like Israel was the first one to attack Iran. So okay. Okay, I already read that part. The communications between Israel and Iran and the role Russia played as the intermediary were unusual given the hostility between the two Middle Eastern rivals, which engaged in a 12-day war in June, like I just mentioned earlier. All right, so now we're going to go to this one right here. Now, this one's important. And I have a video right quick before we touch up on that one.
That it will retaliate in the instance of U.S. strikes against U.S. assets in the Middle East. What do you say to U.S. service members about why it's worth the risk to intervene in Iran?
Yeah, Iran said that the last time I blew them up with the nuclear capability, which they don't have any longer. So Iran said that the last time. They better behave.
Okay. So now apparently this was reported just yesterday. The military base that is located in the Middle East is in Qatar. Just yesterday, the Trump administration had ordered the military base to evacuate. The I might butcher the name a little bit. It's Al Udeid Air Base. Al Udeid Air Base. So U.S. evacuating troops from air base in Qatar ahead of possible Iran military action. Many people last night predicted that the strikes were going to take place because the Trump administration was evacuating the military air base in Qatar. So everyone had thought this was the night. This was going to be the night where the United States government was going to bomb Iran. We all thought it was going to happen last night because they suddenly, out of nowhere, evacuated the military air base. Unfortunately, nothing happened as of this moment. So hundreds of troops have begun leaving the Al Udeid Air Base as President Donald Trump considers a range of options in response to the Iranian regime's deadly crackdown on protesters. The United States has started evacuating hundreds of troops from its largest air base in the Middle East ahead of potential military action by President Donald Trump against Iran. According to U.S. officials, a person familiar with the matter, the troops at Al Udeid Air Base are moving to other facilities and hotels in the region, taking them out of the harm's way should any U.S. action trigger the retaliation from Tehran against American interest. The sources said. And funny enough, after the United States government got involved in the 12-day war and they bombed the nuclear enrichment facilities, Iran bombed this very airbase, but the Iranian government was nice enough to let the United States government to know ahead of time they were going to do this. So that way they can evacuate their own troops and get them out of harm's way. Because the bombing wasn't really that bad, as you can see, because like after it happened, the troops went back to the base and then everything was okie dokie. Is my way of saying it, but so everything was fine. But this is the same military base that's now being evacuated all of a sudden, to the point where it's given this imagery that something is big is about to go down soon. It's given this very big feel. It's given this feeling, and I know everyone right now that's watching the news and having their faces glued to the TV right now, because anything can happen at any moment right now. That we're waiting to see exactly what is going to happen. And let me give you guys like a clear view of what the base looks like right now. This is like 3D imagery right quick. So I have like these 3D imageries of like the base in Qatar right now for you. So I'm glad I brought this up. So this is what the base looks like. As you can see, it's very vast and very big. It's the biggest base in the Middle East right now. You see these 3D imagery. This is where all the aircraft, this is where all the this is all what the big weapons happen at right now. The choppers right here. Yep. As you can see right here, through these 3D images, this is the exact base right here that Iran had bombed last year after the United States government had bombed their nuclear facilities. Of course, it didn't suffer that much damage as you can see, but I'm giving you like the perspective of what the base looks like to show you how massive it is, and that removing all the troops from this base right now, of how important it is, and just makes you raise your eyebrows like, is it really about to go down right now? Because this is a massive base right now. To remove all of our troops from this base right now, all of a sudden, no explanation at all, it just raised the questions of like, what is going on right now? So, as you can see right here, this is all the aircrafts. Yep, that right there is a 3D imagery of the base right there. So I gave you guys like a clear view of what the base looks like. This is from CNN. Trump feels obligated to take action on Iran as administration weighs risk of retaliation. President Donald Trump, facing a red line of his own making in Iran, increasingly believes he must take decisive action against the regime amid a violent and deadly crackdown on protesters, according to the officials familiar with the matter. Top Trump administration officials met Tuesday to further refine a set of options for the president. Trump, who joined the 2-hour plus meeting after landing hours back in Washington from a trip to Michigan, was also briefed on the latest death toll figures in Iran and U.S. expectations for how the regime brutal crackdown might proceed, including the prospect of executions. He was shown video from the ground in Iran as part of the briefing, a person familiar with the meeting said. So, of course, like I mentioned earlier, the executions are not going to go ahead as planned because Iran has changed its tune on continue with executions, of course, because of threat from the United States. So this one right here is from the Jerusalem Post. Our good friends over there at Jerusalem Post. So U.S. military signaled intimate Iran intervention. European officials say the U.S. has ramped up diplomatic moves, including sanctions on Iran officials. That's pretty much what got Iran in this predicament right now, is the fact that they've been sanctioned to hell so many times by the U.S. government that, of course, their economy is going to be in pretty much like in this predicament right now, because like we've sanctioned them so hard, pretty much we don't even want them to exist as a country. We've pretty much put them in a position to where they can't exist as a country, because we sanction them so hard, and we're trying to push on the collapse of this country so hard because this regime that's in power right now is standing in the way of our greatest ally, as they will call themselves. So let me go ahead and put it up right quick. Okay, U.S. military. Oops. Sorry about that. If the video cut off for a moment, because I'm putting the screen up, I'm zooming up a little closer to the article so I could be able to read. U.S. military intervention in Iran could come in the next 24 hours. 2 European officials said on Wednesday evening, Reuters reported. An unnamed Israeli official also said it appeared U.S. President Donald Trump had decided to intervene, though the scope and timing remain unclear. The U.S. has withdrawn some personnel from key bases in the region as a precaution amid heightened regional tensions. As I showed you guys earlier, Reuters reported earlier on Wednesday, citing an unnamed U.S. official. The disclosure follows remarks by a senior Iranian official who told Reuters early on Wednesday that Tehran had warned neighbors hosting U.S. troops that it would hit American bases if Washington strikes. So Iran's already made it very clear, if they're hit, they're going to hit back. They're not going to hit the United States here. They're going to hit the base in Qatar. So Iran was struck last time, and they were very conservative about how they went about retaliating. You know, they let the United States government know ahead of time. They allowed them to evacuate the base, and then they just struck the empty base. Done deal. Now, if they get struck by Washington. They are going to strike the base regardless of who's even there. So Iran's made it clear they can't touch us here. We're on the other side of the world. So there is no worriment on this side of the planet, but there is a worry for our soldiers that are like caught in this little dick measuring contest between Iran and the United States. So Britain is also withdrawing some personnel from an air base in Qatar ahead of possible strikes by the U.S. The iNews reported on Wednesday, mirroring the U.S. Okay, so as we watched this earlier, so Trump urges Iranians to keep protesting, take over institutions, and says help is on the way. It's not good rhetoric from Trump right now. This is not the rhetoric that Americans that are for America First or for an America First policy. This is not America First. Pushing for us to go and get involved and promise to interfere in a domestic issue is not being America First. It's being more of like pro neocon ish. It's neocon coded pretty much. But you have to understand, the Trump administration is right now, for the most part, doing political theater, but it is important to take Trump at his word because of the most recent events that happened in, Venezuela. Then to go further back, last year to June, where we got involved in the 12-day war. We said many of times that we were not going to get involved, but we somehow got involved. It is important to take Trump at his word. If he says help is on the way, we might want to be cautious about what does he mean by that. So I'm gonna play the video. I'm gonna get some water real quick because my throat's kind of drying up.
U.S. President Donald Trump has told Iranian protesters help is on its way, just hours before he meets senior officials to discuss how Washington will deal with the situation. In a social media post, he said, Iranian patriots keep protesting and to take over Iranian institutions. In the post, he says, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way. He signs off with nigger, which means make Iran great again. Those comments come as UN officials say the death toll from protests is in the hundreds. Protests have been taking place since late December, sparked by a worsening economic crisis. Iran has faced decades of crippling sanctions, but demonstrators, they say government corruption and mismanagement has made the crisis even worse.
Killing of peaceful demonstrators must stop. The labelling of protesters as terrorists to justify violence against them is unacceptable. We urge the Iranian authorities to halt immediately all forms of violence and repression against peaceful protesters and to restore full access to the internet and telecommunications services. The High Commissioner stresses that Iranians have the right to demonstrate peacefully. Their grievances need to be heard and addressed and not instrumentalized by anyone.
Tawhid Asadi is standing by in Tehran. But first, let's go over to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. So, Kimberly, help is on its way, he says. What does that mean?
Well, what one presumes it means, based on the briefing that is taking place at the White House, amongst the attendees will be not only Donald Trump, but his national security team, including the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the chair of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane. What we know is that help could come in a number of different forms, and that is what is being discussed at this classified briefing. We know that there is, of course, the military option that the White House press secretary just a day ago said is always on the table. But we also know that that could take a variety of forms. It could be a cyber attack. It could be an airstrike. It could even be a psychological operation. So we presume, once again, that based on the statements coming out of the White House, that this is still option. These are still options that are being considered. The question becomes when the president will make his decision. He just left the White House on Marine One to make a speech in Detroit about economic issues. He did not speak about Iran when he spoke to reporters, sticking strictly to the message of the day with regard to the economy. And so we expect that we could hear more from the president following that speech in the coming hours. And also, we know that he is continuing to weigh those options. As he pointed out, the White House believes that he is his best messenger, through social being the way he likes to communicate directly, in this case to the protesters, saying that the United States is standing with them. As you point out, help is on the way, is what the president said. Again, the big question mark, what form that will take.
Tawhid, are we seeing Iranian officials respond in any way to this? Are we seeing any mobilizations that might indicate they're getting ready for a strike?
Well, actually, so far we didn't. We haven't received any official reaction to the very recent statements that we heard from the U.S. President Donald Trump. But still, speaking of the broader context, we had the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi yesterday coming out in an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera to say that Tehran is ready for any scenario, and the capabilities of the country have been strengthened compared to the previous war, both qualitatively and quantitatively. Also, we've got the Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who was actually among the demonstrators yesterday, and then there was a rally, a pro-state rally in which we've got hundreds of thousands attending. And there he said that in case the United States decides to strike Iran, there are going to be tough repercussions. He said that Iran is going to consider the U.S. military bases and U.S. ships as well as the Israeli territories, quote unquote, as our legitimate targets. This is one strong message that he said. Meanwhile, he also said that in case of...
As you can see right up here, this is pro-government rallies right now. So it's important to realize that not everyone in Iran is anti the regime. They have their loyalists in the government. They have their loyalists. So they're letting their voices be heard, while simultaneously the anti-regime voices are letting their actions speak louder than their words too as well. Really, it is reminiscent of like this protest, from what I've seen, is like reminiscent of like BLM riots. You know, minus the instance of like the IRGC soldiers, you know, the military police also getting like jumped by protesters and having their weapons taken. I mean, right now, I would think right now, if Trump doesn't do anything soon about these protesters in like Minneapolis, it's gonna go down that same route right now as the Iranian revolution. It's gonna look like a revolution over here in the United States if we don't quell some of these protesters who are going out here and attacking ICE agents. But the piggyback back on the protest right now between the pro-regime and anti-regime protesters, it's fuck, I forgot my train of thought. What I was about to say, fuck, I forgot my train of thought. I'm getting so fucking tired, I forget my own train of thought. But what I was about to say was I'll just continue on. I forgot my train of thought. It'll come back to me.
Such an attack. There is a warning for the U.S. allies in the region on that. He asked them to avoid any miscalculation. The defense minister of the country, as well as the secretary for the Supreme National Security Council of the country, are both echoing the same statement that in case any attack comes from the enemy, there's going to be repercussions, which is going to be painful and severe. All in all, this is a very complicated situation, and we are following to see what comes next.
Kimberly, one part of this statement by Donald Trump that got my attention is where he says to Iranians to save the names of Iranian officials. They'll pay a big price. It sounds like he's thinking of toppling the government. How is that kind of message of getting that intertwined in a Middle Eastern conflict going down with Congress, going down with people?
Well, it's not what the U.S. president campaigned on. And in fact, he said he would try and get the United States out of constant foreign entanglements. But so far, that's not what we've seen from this president. It is unpopular among the American public for further interventions, particularly when it comes to Iran. The most recent poll numbers show 51% of Americans not in favor of military strikes or any sort of military intervention, according to the latest polls. We also know that it's not popular on Capitol Hill, at least with opposition Democrats, for a number of reasons. Number one, they believe that it is not in the interest of the United States to further engage in war around the world, but also that the U.S. president is exceeding his presidential authority, that he needs to speak to Congress. There should be a debate and a vote per the U.S. Constitution prior to any sort of military action. But the administration in the past has justified this as saying it's part of the president's emergency powers. For the most part, we should point out that this is a view along party lines, with Democrats in favor of military strikes, even as the American public signaling something very different.
Kimberly Halkett outside the White House, Tawhid Asadi in Tehran. Thank you both. There's been a flurry of reaction to the situation in Iran. The UK, Italy and Germany have all summoned the Iranian ambassadors over the crackdown on protesters. The European Union and the UK have announced plans to further sanction Iran over the protests. While Russia says threats of new military strikes are categorically unacceptable and condemns interference in Iran's internal affairs. Officials in Qatar say they're working tirelessly to calm the tensions between...
They say they condemn it, but Russia's not going to do nothing right now. They still have their hands full with Ukraine, even though that war should have been over years ago, and it's still raging right now. But they have our tax money, and then they get weaponry. So that's why Ukraine's still in the fight right now, is because they're getting money and they're getting weaponries to keep fighting. Whereas Ukraine should have been wiped, the war should have been over with years ago, like I'll say 2 years ago at this point. Probably 3. But the fact that this still been raging on for this long is like insane to me. So,
Between the US and Iran, Ali Hashim reports from Doha.
Escalation between the United States and Iran and threats of military action are raising concern among regional states. Qatar's foreign ministry spokesman said his country is participating in efforts to diffuse tension.
The talks continue, our calls continue. There is no specific effort that I can point to right now, but we are involved in talking to all parties, obviously with our neighbors and our partners in the region to find a diplomatic solution.
The spokesman said that his country supports dialogue to solve this issue and also called on Israel to implement its part of the deal in Gaza. Ali Hashim, Al Jazeera, Doha.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.
okay. So, let's go. Now we're going to go right back to the airbase that was evacuated. The United States has rejoined some personnel from multiple bases in the Middle East. Personnel from multiple bases in the Middle East as tensions flare with Iran. Dozens of Americans are at risk. If things get heated with Iran, pray for troops.
Breaking news. You see this map on your screen. That is where the United States has military bases throughout the Middle East. Now, we can confirm that the U.S. is withdrawing some personnel from major bases across the Middle East due to heightened regional tensions. And you look at some of this in Qatar. That's the Al Udeid Air Base. You got about 8,000 to 10,000 U.S. service members. That's one of the larger bases. You got another Army base in Kuwait that's been operating for some time now, several years, if not decades. So how much of withdrawal, we do not know.
And why?
And why is the ultimate question as to whether or not we are in for some sort of military action, possibly in Iran. Ago, meanwhile, got some breaking news. You see this map?
Yes, we are. So this one right here, probably just a little throwaway segment right here, but just in Beijing tells China firms to stop using U.S. and Israeli cybersecurity software. That's from Reuters. This was reported on the 14th. This was reported yesterday, actually. It's probably not, it's not pertaining to the subject per se, but it is interesting that China has decided to stop using U.S. and Israeli cybersecurity programs. I wonder why. So this is Trump right here. That has, this is when he was let's see something else right quick. Actually, before we go to that one, this is 6 U.S. Air Force K-6 135 Taker aircraft have taken off from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. This was pretty much, I guess this was like the evacuation of our soldiers and the military personnel that were at the air base in Qatar. Then this one right here, actually, this one right here I want to address right quick before we get into the Trump video. So Barry Weiss, a literal foreign operative that works for CBS News now because the son of Larry Ellison, David Ellison, had purchased CBS, acquired it along pretty much the entire Paramount, and then he puts Barry Weiss in charge of the news section of pretty much of the Paramount CBS merger. So Barry Weiss is in charge of CBS now. She's running things pretty much, and now she comes out and, well, not her per se, but CBS News falsely reported that as many as 20,000 people were killed in Iran during the recent anti-government protest. But the real reports are like at most 2,000 people have been killed. That's what it says on this. But now we got the official numbers. It's like 3,000 plus. That's according to what the regime has put out there. Now, of course, people are going to be asking like, oh, do you really going to believe the regime that they're going to give out that's less deflated number, whatever? There's a possibility they could be lying. There's also a possibility that they could be telling the truth. We don't know 100% for sure. That doesn't make me pro-regime again, but you can use the critical thinking skills right now. As nice as Iran has been with us right now, I would believe they arrested more people than they've actually like executed. and they were supposed to execute some more people that they have already jailed because of this whole protesting thing that happened in Iran. So, where is it's right over here? Oh, so we're gonna get to the video now. For Trump said he's been informed that the killing of protesters in Iran have been stopped and no executions are planned.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or an execution or executions. So I've been told that on good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll all be very upset, including you will be very upset, but that's just gotten to me from information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution, which a lot of people were talking about for the last couple of days. Today was going to be the day of execution. And another piece of information that I think is very important is the leaker has been found.
Oh,
we've been told that
that part I was interested about. I watched the clip. I didn't watch the full stream of him doing his executive order signing, and then while the press roll was there, as per usual, and then he was answering press questions as he always does. You know, Trump loves talking to the press, and, you know, boaster about like how well the economy is, how well he's doing with the deportations, which are both not true, but that's just the type of guy Trump is. That's why I love him so much. But anyways, so we're gonna get into this right here. Actually, should I? Okay, I'll say that one for last. So the finance minister, with a foreign minister, I mean, he done a interview. I might have called him the finance minister earlier. I apologize. It's foreign minister. Again, and forgive me. I am tired as fuck right now. I'm literally about to fucking crash. I'm ready about to crash out when I get off of here. But the foreign minister did a interview with Fox News just the other day. I think it was with Brett Bart. Brett Bear, I believe. Let me see who he did the interview with. Yeah, Brett Bear. Yeah, he's the one that did the interview. He's the one that conducted the interview with the foreign minister, and I watched the whole thing. And Brett was pressing hard on the foreign minister, and then even the foreign minister alluded to the fact that there were foreign operatives that were on the grounds in the crowd, stoking this protest, and basically like trying to entice these protesters to go even further with trying to execute like basically like a revolution, another one, an Iranian a 2026 Iranian revolution, pretty much. But then of course Brett does says, do you really believe, and you're going to see those in the interview, ask him a question, do you really think the general public really believes that? Well, Brett, we have the sources of the internet, and then we have guys like the former CIA director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on X literally saying Happy New Year's to all the Iranian people that are standing up to the regime and to the Mossad agents that are in the crowd. Mike Pompeo may have tried to post that for like some satire reason, but I really don't believe 100% that a guy like him, who is a very hardcore neocon, is not giving away the sauce that Mossad is involved in this. I wouldn't even believe this. I wouldn't even go as far as to not believe the CIA is not also involved. I believe both agencies are involved to some degree, because this is right up their alley, especially the CIA. We already know that rogue agency goes and does whatever it wants because it pretty much executes regime change. That's just what they do. Get my words all messed up right now because I'm so fucking tired. But anyways, that's exactly what we're going to see during this interview. So Brett pretty much just presses the finance minister hard. Well, foreign minister, I keep saying finance. He presses the foreign minister very hard with some tough questions. Finance minister, for me personally, he holds his part pretty well in the interview.
Joining me is Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi.
As you can see right there from all those videos, yeah, that's
Mr. Foreign Minister, thank you for the time. I'd like to start about the situation on the ground. There are reports, sir, that anywhere from 2,500 to more than 12,000 protesters in various cities have been killed by the regime. How many people have been killed?
Well, thank you, President, for having me. Demonstrations started on 28 December, yes, for the economic shortcomings, and for 10 days it was peaceful, and the government engaged with the protesters and with their leaders and tried to solve their problems. Yes, for 10 days it was peaceful, legal demonstrations and protests for economic shortcomings. But after that 10 days, for 3 days, we had completely different story. A terrorist operation, when terrorist elements led from outside, entered these, protests and started to shoot, police forces, police officers and security forces. And there were terrorist cells. They came in. They used Daesh-style terrorist, operations. They got police officers, burned them alive. They beheaded them, and they started shooting at police officers and also to the people. So as a result, for 3 days, we had, in fact, fighting against terrorists and not with the protesters. It was completely a different story. The reason I have to explain, and this is important, why they started to shoot at people, for one reason, they wanted to increase the number of deaths. Why? Because President Trump has said that if there are killings, he would intervene. And they wanted to drag him into this conflict. And that was exactly an Israeli plot. They wanted to drag the President of the United States in this conflict, so they started to increase the number of deaths by killing ordinary people, by killing police officers, by starting a kind of, fighting inside the different cities.
Mr. Foreign Minister, you're saying that these killings, these deaths are at the hands of foreign elements inside your country, not by the Iranian regime? That's not what we're being told when we get people to talk to us on the ground. The internet has been shut off, but occasionally turns back on, and we do hear from people on the ground who tell us various stories. Witnesses spoke of seeing snipers positioned on rooftops in downtown Tehran, firing into crowds of peaceful protests, turning abruptly into scenes of...
Yeah, that's the thing about it, and that's what Brett's trying to do here. He's trying to get this. He's trying to basically cut the foreign minister, basically kind of like saying, "Hey, listen, you're lying. We have ears on the ground from the protesters themselves, even though technically speaking, those protesters could probably be Mossad themselves. If we don't really know, like we have to use some critical thinking skills here. Like what he's saying is that they have reports on the ground that." The regime is, and I'm not going to put it past them, like the military personnel, the ones pushing back hard on these protesters to get them to basically stop altogether, so that way they can end this problem before it gets to the point of where they're going to rise up and overthrow the Ayatollah. So... But again, it's very important to realize why he said that, and now because he's gonna say that we flatly, like majority of people, do not believe you, quite frankly. And again, Brett can speak for himself. It's kind of clear that so far Iran, it looks like they've been at the negotiating table no matter what, and it just seems like to me the United States has always been the one to mess up the negotiations between us and Iran, because we could end the crippling sanctions right now and actually stop this problem from ever happening again, because the reason why they're protesting in the first place is because of the economy. And we basically kind of did that to their economy by sanctioning it to hell. So essentially that is on us. And that's why these people are literally chanting death to America.
Carnage, panic as bullets pierced through people's heads and torsos, sending bodies toppling to the ground, and an emergency room treating 19 gunshot patients in a single hour. The regime is on a killing spree, said one protester, and we've seen the video of body bags stacking up. You are saying that all of this is because you're not in control of your country and foreign elements are killing people inside your country?
No, I'm telling you that it was a fighting between our security forces and terrorist elements who had a plan to create a big number of killings in order to provoke President Trump to enter into this conflict and start a new war against Iran. And that was exactly an Israeli plot. The footages that you mentioned have not been seen in Iran. I have to tell you that a misinformation campaign is going on at the same time.
And you're suggesting that it's Israel and Mossad acting like Iranian forces, shooting the Iranian people to make casualties to spur on the action of President Trump. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that don't believe that, Mr. Foreign Minister.
No, Mossad has already confessed that.
They may be on the ground, sir, but as far as them killing hundreds and hundreds of people to make it look like you did, it does not appear in the video that we get out that this is a full level.
Yeah, bro, it's like literally one video. Like, we don't even know. Dude's gonna use the propaganda and try to weaponize it to give this, just try to give this false imagery that the foreign ministers here sitting up here lying to the public about what's really going on the ground, and basically to sit up here and say that, hey, we don't believe you, that you're up here being sincere with us right now. We have this one video of you from this one angle to show you that this is what's going on right now in your country, and we believe that all of this killing is done by the regime itself, and all this should fall back on the regime. In some cases, you could make that argument. Of course, I'm not going to be a monster about it, but here's one thing I will say. The regime is dealing with the results of all the sanctions that were done to the regime, to the country by the United States and all other European countries, the EU and stuff. And I'm not trying to sound like a liberal or whatever, but that's kind of what put these people in a situation to where they have no choice but to go after guys like, shit, I just lost my train of thought again. Yeah, so it just puts them in predicament right now. That's what I will say. In on that.
Of calm. It appears that protests continue in a number of different cities. The exiled Iranian crown prince, talking to people on the ground, said this.
About 12,000 plus.
12,000 plus.
That's what we get so far. It might be more, but that's the minimum number that we know so far have been
killed by the regime.
When I saw that, and I just know that he's full of shit. He didn't even state where he got that exact number from. He just said that that's 12,000 plus. That's how I know, of course, because like the prince is going to say this fallen prince, as I like to call him, he's going to say anything just to draw sympathy from the American people, post the videos, try to draw the sympathy, saying this is what's going on around. We need to act now to rid the country of this terrible regime and allow me to take my throne back as the ruler of Iran. So, but of course he's gonna state an almost an inflated number, because we got the real official number of how many were killed, and he's just giving like an inflated number because that's just what he wants to do.
This is not arrested. This is
we are talking about using military weapons, AK-47s, armored trucks to shoot to kill unarmed protesters. Their bodies are being picked up by bulldozers, and they charge each family for the bullet to be able to just retrieve the remains. It's abhorrent what's happening.
You're denying that that's happening, or you're saying it's Israel and Mossad?
Well, we are on the ground in Iran. Those claims are baseless. There is no proof of that. The number of deaths, although they tried hard to increase the number of deaths, are only hundreds. The exact figure would be announced very soon, perhaps tonight, by our authorities.
So you're saying it's less than 1,000 people?
No, hundreds of people. I certainly, deny the numbers and figures they have said. It is an exaggeration. It is a misinformation campaign only to find excuses to do another aggression against Iran. I can tell you that now it is 4 days that everything is calm. There is no demonstration. There is no unrest, nothing in Iran for the past 4 days. Yes, there has been millions of people today for funerals, and 2 days ago, a big rally in support of the government and of the system. So people are on the streets, but in support of the Islamic Republic.
Wow,
so
that's not what we hear when we hear people on the ground.
I can refer you to the tweets and sayings and interviews by Israeli officials.
Brad is up there doing his best to push that Hezbollah talking points right now. That, oh no, that's not what we're hearing for. We're hearing on the ground and all that. From who, bro? Who's your source on the ground, man? Can you give us your inside sources? I'm curious to know who's his sources on the ground, because Trump did allude to that when he was signing those executive orders the other day in the White House, that yes, their sources were found out. What was the source? I'm curious to know.
Officials who have claimed themselves that Mossad agents are inside Iran, in the Iranian streets, in Tehran streets. Just look at the X, account of Mossad in Persia, who said that their agents are in Iran and they are doing their job.
Okay, I can't push back about where Mossad agents are or not. I can say, if anybody is taunting President Trump, it is the Supreme Leader, who took to X and posted this, saying for days now, calling President Trump a tyrant who will be overthrown. Why, if you're saying the Israeli outside forces inside your country are doing this, why would the Supreme Leader himself take to X and taunt the President of the United States?
Well, we were in the middle of a war started against us, and the rhetorics are quite normal in any war. We have many kind of threats by President Trump, by other American officials, by Europeans who are talking about Iranian, things in Iran. So we consider these 3 days, 8 January to 10, which we faced with a vast terrorism operation, as the continuation of 12-day war. that were imposed on us by Israelis and Americans. So the 13th day of war was 8th January. That was the continuation of the war. So we were in the middle of the war. And now, after 3 days of terrorist operation, now there is a calm. We are in full control. And let's, hope that wisdom would prevail and we don't go for a high level of tension, which could be disastrous for everybody.
Are you moving forward with hangings of some of the protesters, or at least one of the protesters?
No, I haven't heard about that, and there is no any hanging today or tomorrow or whatever. That's Friday. I can tell you.
This is before they announced the protesters' execution was off.
Confident about that. There is no plan for hanging at all.
Okay, well, you've heard the president's talk, President Trump, and you've heard his concern about crossing this red line, and you've heard him shut off communications with you because he's seen what he's seen and heard what he's heard on the ground. In fact, he was asked about this possible hanging and what the death he's seeing.
And if they hang him, you're going to see some things that I don't know what where you come from and what your thought process is, but you'll perhaps be very happy.
What do you mean by that?
We will take very strong action. If they want to have protests, that's one thing. When they start killing thousands of people, and now you're telling me about hanging, we'll see how that works out for them. It's not going to work out good.
How do you read the president's comments over the past few days?
Well, first of all, hanging is out of the question, as I said. This is another piece of misinformation campaign that they have started to provoke President Trump and to drag him into this this question, and which could have disastrous consequences. And on your first point that you mentioned, that he cut any communication with Iran, this is not the first time. You remember that we were negotiating in June when they decided to attack us. We were in the middle of negotiations. We had 5 rounds of negotiations between me and Steve Witkoff, and we had already fixed the 6th round for 15 June when in 2 days before that they attacked us.
Because you came on this show and you said you were never going to reduce legitimate enrichment. You were never going to drop it down. You also talked about continuing a ballistic missile program. Is that continuing today? That's why the president said he was moving forward on the nuclear program.
To be fair, we did say at first they could have enrichment at like 3.5%, to be fair. So, and as far as the military missiles ballistic program, that's not really of concern. First off, we were making it about the enrichment of the uranium. Now we're worrying about the ballistic missiles program, which if they were to get rid of both, even not saying that they are making a nuclear weapon, but they get rid of the uranium, then they get rid of the missiles, you're pretty much putting them in a position how Libya was like, right up to Gaddafi's death. So you're putting them in a position to where they're going to be completely defenseless and they're susceptible to being wiped out completely and turn it into the Libya model, as a Israeli diplomat had said during our article. They want the Libya model for Iran. They want to turn Iran basically into Libya 2.0. If you don't know what you're trying to tell about Muammar Gaddafi, do your research on that right now. Watch the documentary. But just to say, it doesn't really end too well for Iran if they're without the missiles program. The nuclear facilities destroyed. Pretty much, it's just going to become a whole new. It's going to become a whole new game right there at that point. Because then at that point, they really are going to turn into the Libya model, and then the Ayatollah will probably most likely have to escape from Iran to face execution, arrest, and go live right across the hallway from Bashar al-Assad.
That was expanding.
No, both enrichment and our defense capabilities are our legitimate rights. No, as a full and committed member of NPT, we have every right to do enrichment for peaceful purposes. And you cannot tell another country that you shouldn't exercise your right, otherwise you will be attacked.
But Mr. Foreign Minister, we talked about this. We talked about this months ago. Are you open to direct talks with the Trump administration to try to find a solution that could de-escalate heightened regional tension after all that's happened?
Iran is still insisting on its peaceful nuclear program, including enrichment, but our position has not changed. We are still, committed not to go for nuclear weapons, but we are not ready to give up our legitimate right for peaceful use of nuclear technology, including enrichment.
Legitimate peaceful purposes for a nuclear program usually are not buried a mile down deep. And that is where the concern was.
President Trump proved to be against diplomacy when he attacked us in June, and when now he decided to cut any communication. So if there is any real interest.
To be fair again, against for Iran, the reason why they built it was for the purpose to avoid having it be bombed by the United States. Ironic enough. So that's why they put the nuclear facilities underground, because that was to avoid being bombed. So imagine if they did have it visible right now out in the open, and we go backwards back to when Trump bombed those facilities, and imagine if those facilities weren't buried deep underground and they were instead surface level. Yeah, they would have been destroyed. So
to engage into to promote understanding and to understand what's going on really on the ground, he has to pay attention to the realities and not to the misinformation provided to him by those who want to drag him into another war.
Again, I go back to the Supreme Leader, who does not sound like he's anxious to sit down and talks with President Trump.
All right, so we'll move on. All right, so we're going to get into the last part of the story right here. And Iran shuts down airspace. Now, just as recent as it's 12:34 p.m., they've reopened the airspace now completely and said that pretty much they were closed for the business a little bit, but then they open right back up. It's like a food business, like it closed down remainder of the night, then it opens back up in the morning. So Iran didn't keep its airspace closed for too long. So they reopened it up. Everyone was wondering what was going on. Why did they close their airspace? So we still don't already have a verification about that, but more details come out, I'll probably do a follow-up on that.
The killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that on good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll be very upset, including you will be very upset.
And moments ago, Iran closed its airspace without explanation, at least temporarily. Here to discuss this, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, 3 hours ago, we were hearing that America could be planning military strikes against Iran. However, the president came out and made those kind of cryptic comments about the killing stopping. Then Iran closes its airspace, and we're moving personnel out of our military bases in the region. What the heck's going on here?
For real.
Well, Laura, what I would recommend is rather than closing its airspace, it stop the violence against its own people. The massacre of innocent civilians now probably numbers in the thousands. President Trump has made it clear he's not going to tolerate this kind of wanton violence against the people who are simply yearning for freedom after 47 years of oppression by the Ayatollahs, which are also spreading revolutionary violence and terror around the world with the blood of hundreds of Americans on their hands. I think President Trump this afternoon was specifically referring to certain public executions that were scheduled that it appears at the time had not gone forward. We'll find out, as he said. But he's been very clear in his demands that the Ayatollahs stop the wanton violence against their own people.
Senator Cotton, you get confidential, top secret briefings in your position in the Senate. The American people aren't privy to what the administration does know about what's happening there. But as usual, I think people are concerned. They're concerned that we could be edging toward war. They're concerned that helping Iran, in a noble pursuit indeed, how does that help the average American who's still struggling to pay some bills? And you see it online, and these are MAGA diehards who have some concerns, not overly freaking out, but some concerns here.
Yeah, Laura, and I can understand that. First, I'd point to what you might call the President Trump way of war. If you look at the most consequential, bold, and audacious actions he's taken, the killing of the ISIS leader in Syria, the killing of Iran's terrorist mastermind in Iraq, the strikes against Iran's nuclear programs last year, and the masterful apprehension of Nicolas Maduro just a couple weeks ago. These look nothing like the Iraq or Afghanistan war. They were not commitments of tens of thousands of troops on open-ended missions. These were direct, bold strikes that advanced clear national security priorities. And of course, Iran has been terrorizing the United States and the civilized world for 47 years. As I said, they've got the blood of
Trump said he doesn't want a long, dragged out fight. He wants to end this in one decisive blow. And the problem with that being, you're not going to end this in one decisive blow. I'd be lucky if that happens, but it's not going to happen. So in order to execute a regime change, you need to have boots on the ground. And unfortunately, Americans are against that. They don't want their tax dollars going to another regime change where it's going to destabilize the country and put it off far worse than it was before. So people are not on board with that.
Hundreds of Americans on their hands. And unless there's a fundamental change in the behavior of the Ayatollahs, the only way Iran will stop being this source of instability, disorder, chaos, and violence is for the Iranian people to take their future in their hands. Again, yearning for freedom for 47 years. It would certainly be better for us and all of our friends if Iran was not exporting revolutionary violence and terror every day.
Senator, the added benefit of cleaving China away from Iran. That can't be understated either, if indeed there's new leadership there. Senator, we'll be watching this closely. Thank you so much, sir.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere.
All right. So, get my final remarks about everything we've talked about so far. And I'm kind of a little tired. So, the final remarks is for everyone right now watching and watch the stream that tune in and going to watch the replay. Let me remind you of something. Just because of what you're seeing right now on screens and pretty much you're feeling a inclination to go there and feel like we have to go there and liberate. Hold on 1 second. And feel like we have to go there and spread democracy. Go about spreading democracy for Iran. Free the Iranian people from their monarch rulers. Well, let me be completely honest right now for people so they can understand this. We've seen this happen before. It was with Saudi Arabia. And look at them now. They're our partners. So people up here are demonizing the regime and saying the regime is like the most evil regime on the planet. It's oppressing its people. It's doing some heinous actions. It's sitting there and pushing its own people over the edge. It's pretty much oppressing them. Yeah, so let me remind you, Saudi Arabia does the same thing, but the only difference is they are our ally. They are our ally. They're not our enemy. They're our ally. So that's the difference. If you look at Iran and Saudi Arabia, it's not very much difference day and night, but one's an ally, one's not. So. And then all these propaganda related videos of what's going on in the protests to show people that are constantly tuning in to fall for an easy propaganda to bring you guys in, to draw you in to the idea that we need to go there, we need to liberate these people and bring about democracy to Iran. Because it oppresses, I don't know, gay women's rights or whatever, gays or whatever. And that's kind of based, I'm not gonna lie, but the Iranian Revolution is interesting one so far. I would say that, but it's clear that a lot of people don't read and they don't do the due diligence to go out there and actually learn this stuff. They just go on the mic and just make it up on the fly, you know. So people have got to stop falling for the easy propaganda and actually realize the reason why I've already said a lot already. I should have waited to my final monologue to go ahead and save all my best stuff for last, but it's like, it's really just like, it's given like late, okay, so. But the most important thing, I will say this, since I'm getting kind of sleepy right now, okay, I'm tired, but one thing I would say this is that people have got to stop falling for shit like you see and feel like that we are the country to go there and bring about democracy. When you look at like groups like that sit up here and pushing for that language, you're literally pushing for a form of neoconservatism, which in itself wants to spread democracy to countries that are not democracy. They don't have a public president involved, to where they push this democracy on their people, and then their people fall in line and love their ruler, or for president for the most part, that comes there and is pro-Israel. Okay, so the big message is Netanyahu couldn't convince Trump enough. So the next best option was to have basically these riots break out in far worse session, and then you record what's going on ground to convince the people to riot even more. And then you do, and what you do with the footage that's posted social media, you take it and you have mainstream media push it even further to draw the sympathy of the masses so they can come in and try to convince the Trump administration to go in and bomb Iran. And he has the full support of the American people. Because you have a bunch of these humanitarian groups that are sitting there and are urging Donald Trump to go in there and just bomb the facilities. Well, not bomb the facility, bomb the country. Go out there and bomb the regime. Commit to regime change. That's basically what they're asking for. And I'm sitting here telling you that that's not America first at all. Like, these humanitarian groups act like we have to go there and clean up all of their problems. And I'm telling you this right now, we don't need to go up there and clean our problems. Their problems are not our problems. We are Americans. We have our own issues right now. You really think we need to go and involve ourselves in like a domestic dispute between the government and its people? This happens all the time there. They've had multiple protests. The problem with the matter is that we have people that are pushing for this war, and we see intentionally what they're doing. So there is a form of like bad faith actors that are around here that are in the crowd, that are intelligence based, that know what they're doing, trying to incite the crowd to take further actions and to go far into violence to provoke the regime, to act in more intense matter to quell the problem. The only problem is now they already solved the solution. As a reporter right now, they've quelled the problem down. Now the regime has raised down has put down the hammer, and now they have everything under control. So, but this was also another plan in the motion for Israel to try to push for a regime change war. Trump didn't bite down on it yet. So we don't know for sure if we're out of the woods just yet, because anything could happen in the next 24 hours or so. Hell, the next 5 hours from now. You don't know what's going to happen. Sure, you can literally just, like I'm about to do, is go to sleep and wake up, and then next thing you know, Trump bomber are on. And for what? There are people being oppressed. Like I said, I'm not going to be cold-hearted and not be understanding about what's going on the ground, especially for the people. But it's important to understand the sanctions that we put on them. Where is it? Yep. So it's important to understand the sanctions that we put on them. This is from the United States. So 1979 Executive Order 12-170 froze 8.1 billion in Iranian assets in the U.S. following the embassy hostage crisis. That's literally after the Iranian Revolution took place. During that point, we froze literally billions of dollars that belonged to the Iranian people because they were in the middle of transitioning from like an authoritarian democracy to a monarch system. So as it says right here, 1984, state sponsor of terrorism designation, ban arms sales, foreign assistance, and dual use exports after the Beirut barracks bombing remains in effect and triggering ongoing restrictions. Of course, they are going after Iran, who funds, their proxy groups, or for other people, terrorist organizations that work to quell Israel and basically take it out. But anyways, it says right here, 1984 state sponsor of terrorism designation. What I already read that one. 1987 executive order 12613 banned most U.S. imports from India. From Iran, bruh. I gotta get some sleep. From Iran due to actions in the Persian Gulf during the Iraq and Iran war. Okay. So, and as of course it goes on, 1995, 1996, 2005, 2010, 2012, 2016. That was when we came about with the JCPOA. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2023 to 2026. And that's pretty much like a summary of all the sanctions that we have against Iran. But that's what put the economy in the position that it's been in, because we sanctioned them to hell. So their economy, their dollar is pretty much worthless because the United States government literally does not want Iran to exist as a sovereign country. In my opinion, we could have a form of diplomacy with them instead of just completely wiping them out. And they've been reluctant to be diplomatic, but the problem is, we have another person in our ear telling us that we need to do this and do that, and the president seems to be listening to them more than coming to a more of like a solution to where we don't have to bomb people and don't have to put boots on the ground to commit to a regime change. We can literally just have the form of diplomacy and get them to play ball with us. The thing about Maduro was a socialist dictator in the Western Hemisphere, in our backyard, offend to do dealings with China and Russia instead of playing nice ball with the United States. So, and we didn't even bother giving him the chance to have diplomacy with us either. But I'm willing to get this right now with Iran, because like the region it's in, has nothing to do with us. It's not our region. It's not our problem. So this is why it's important to understand this stuff, and this is why it's important to stop falling for the propaganda to get you to galvanize behind a clear want for war with the United States and for Israel. Especially for Israel. They want this more than us because we don't want to be involved in this conflict. We just put ourselves involved because Trump decides to go and bomb the nuclear facilities when he wasn't supposed to do that, because he promised no new wars. That means we don't get involved in foreign wars between two foreign countries that have nothing to do with us. Israel could have fought its own battle. So that's that. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I'm going to get some sleep, and I will see you guys. Well, I'm not going to be a Friday live. Again, I'm going to record the show tonight, and I will drop it on Friday. But I'll see you guys back live on, like, maybe I might go a live Sunday for you guys to do like a chill stream. I'll let you guys know. Keep in contact. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll